Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at Embargo. This is a 2-cost action card from Seaside, and it says +2 coins, trash this. If you did, add an Embargo token to a supply pile. For the rest of the game, when a player buys a card from that pile, they gain a curse. Now, if you have Seaside in real life, you might notice that this card is written slightly differently to how you might realise it. There is this "if you did" clause added after trash this. So the functionality of this card has changed in recent years. So this is actually quite important, and we're just going to go through some clarifications. For the purposes of this video, we will actually be using this the version of the card, because that's what you play with online, and I do try to use the most recent versions of cards when I do these videos. So placing an Embargo token is conditional upon Embargo successfully trashing itself. So this means, like with all of the other conditional trash cards, like Treasure Map, if you throw an Embargo, you will get the 2 coins twice for a total of 4 money, but you only get to place 1 Embargo token, and that'll be on the first play when it trashed itself. Similarly, if you use a command card, like Band of Misfits, to play Embargo, where it's not allowed to move from the supply pile, this will not trash it, so you do not get to place a token, but you will still get the 2 money. Multiple Embargo tokens can stack on a single pile so that you give out more curses with each purchase of a card from that pile. And like with all things that give out curses, when the curse pile empties, it doesn't give out curses anymore, and you can again safely buy cards from that pile. So Embargo is what we call a one-shot terminal silver. So it's a one-shot because it trashes itself on play. You only get to play it once. One-shots don't have to trash themselves. They can return themselves to their pile or whatever, but Embargo trashes itself. So in addition to just giving you money at the cost of an action, it also allows you to try and disincentivize buying cards from a particular supply pile by making the purchasing of that card also give you a curse. Generally, you would look to try and embargo piles that your opponents are looking to buy from, but you aren't. You can embargo cards that you're planning to buy yourself, but it means that you will also be cursing yourself, which is usually not great, right? Normally, you want to play Embargo to try and hurt your opponent more than you hurt yourself, fairly obviously. Now, it's important here, Embargo only applies to buying a card and not gaining it. If there are other ways to gain cards from a pile, Embargo will not work. So Workshop is an example. Gold gainers, remodel, there are lots and lots of ways to gain cards that allow you to basically circumnavigate Embargo. And what this means is that on some boards, it's just very, very easy to gain cards rather than buy them, and therefore Embargo has basically no real use. Right, you just ignore it completely, because if someone embargoes a pile, you just look to gain it rather than buy it, and you just buy something else. Another big problem that Embargo has is that it's actually really slow. So because Embargo is trying to punish you for buying a card, the reality is that you buy cards a lot sooner than you start playing them. So if I buy a card, I have to wait until I next shuffle and then draw that card in order to actually play it. And that can take, particularly at the start of the game, that can take many turns. Right, the card you buy on turn 1, you could wait all the way until turn 5 until you actually get a chance to play it. And what that means is that because you have to play Embargo to try and block buys, there is usually this sizable window of opportunity where your opponent can just buy the card anyway, and you don't really have any way to stop them because you just haven't had the chance to play Embargo yet. Right, this is what we mean when we say Embargo is slow. Right, you're playing the card to block something that happens much sooner than a card play, and sometimes that's just not going to work in your favour at all. So, theoretically, if you want to embargo a card that's going to be useful to play, and your opponent's going to want multiple copies, it's probably going to be something like an action card, best time to do that is as soon as possible. And this is where Embargo's slowness is a real big problem for it. Because, in just especially at the start of the game where it's taking you a while to, like, your deck's not completely under control yet, and it takes you multiple turns to find things. Like, there's just no good opportunity to do that before your opponent has gone ahead and bought all the cards, some of the cards they want anyway. This also has a big opportunity cost early in the game. It's a one-shot terminal silver rather than a card that is actually useful for building a deck with. And so when you buy Embargo instead of something else that is more useful, you're actually slowing yourself down as well to buy this slow card. This is probably best demonstrated with an example, so that's what we're going to do. So let's just imagine this theoretical example where we've got some kingdom. Trashing is really important on this kingdom for some reason, but the only way that you get to trash cards is through trading post. Now, if you've watched the trading post video, you'll know that this isn't very good as a trasher because it's gaining you silvers while you do it, so you're not actually thinning very much. You still end up with all these stop cards, and it's also quite expensive at 5. Now, in this particular example, we opened with 5-2 in some order, and so we look to buy trading post and embargo on our first 2 turns, and we want to look to embargo the trading post. So we think, hey, I'd like to get in this early embargo on a card that's really useful. Right, my opponent's definitely going to want trading post at some point, so I'm going to try and embargo it before they get a chance to buy it. So this has a couple of things that might seem really good for embargo. So first of all, because trading post is really slow, every stock card matters. So even if they only buy 1 copy of trading post, you're going to give them 1 curse, and that's actually still going to be important, right? They're still going to have more stock cards than you for a long time through the game. Embargo as a one-shot terminal silver means that you don't need to buy a silver early on. You're going to be getting silvers from your trading post, and by just not buying that permanent stop card in the opening turns, you just get to maintain being a bit thinner sooner. So that's just another case where you get your trashing really well as a result. Right, you don't want to add a permanent silver, so the fact that Embargo leaves your deck after 1 play is actually an advantage in this case. And of course, because you opened 5-2 in this particular example, the opportunity cost of getting the embargo was fairly low, because what else were you going to do on that 2-cost turn, right? You weren't giving up a 3 or a 4 card cost purchase in order to get it. However, even this example, where everything seems to be coming up roses for embargo, things can very easily go wrong. So first of all, we actually had to open 5-2, and also our opponent has to not open 5-2 in order for this to even work, right? The odds are against you to open 5-2, and your opponent could also do the same, and they'll just buy the trading post in the opening, and then, all of this was irrelevant. So already you're sort of fighting against the odds for this situation to be good. The second problem is that you have to actually draw embargo at a good time. You might not draw it until turn 4 or 5. Your opponent might get 5 and buy their trading post on turn 3. Well, in that case, you didn't even have the chance to block them, right? It just didn't come up. And even in the situations where you do draw embargo on turn 3, you might be the second player, and your opponent, who was first player, goes ahead and buys the trading post on turn 3 anyway, right? So even when the draws were good, you still got screwed. And of course, this is a terminal, and so is trading post. You might actually draw them together, and in that case, well, it's probably more important to just play the trading post, in which case you just missed your chance to actually embargo the trading post while it was still relevant. Now, of course, I did here choose an example where this would be a problem. It could have been that the only trasher was Sentry instead, in which case you don't worry about terminal collision, but this is just to demonstrate how even when you try and theory craft ways for embargo to be good, like, so many things can happen that just conspire against you to make embargo not actually very effective, particularly in this early game situation. So embargo isn't just the early game, of course. Why not just wait a while and then play it later? Now, in theory, embargo sort of starts to get a bit worse the longer you wait. And that is because, well, for a start, you're just not got as much potential out of it, because your opponent may have already bought a bunch of cards from that pile. Secondly is that curses aren't such a big problem once your deck is already under control. With junkers, it's usually very important that you start junking straight away, because you want to stop your opponent ever getting under control. If you are adding 1 curse to opponent per turn, but they are able to very easily draw their deck and trash it every turn, it sort of doesn't really matter that much. Yes, it still gives that chance that they will fail, but like it's much harder to deal with. It's much harder, for curses to be good to give to your opponent once they are already in a situation where they can just sort of deal with them and trash them straight away. So the longer you wait with Embargo, you may find that Embargo just sort of stops actually being useful, and they might just start buying the card anyway. They're just like, yeah, I'll take the curse. It doesn't matter. I can deal with it. So because of its slowness, it's much easier to use Embargo effectively when you have some kind of advance warning of what it is your opponent is going to be doing. So there are two situations where this tends to crop up, and that is potion cost cards and alternate VP. And we're just going to go through each of these now individually. So what is potion? So in the Alchemy expansion, there's this card called Potion. Some cards cost potion and also potentially some money to buy. So potion is just a treasure. You have to basically play it to generate a potion instead of coins like you would with normal treasures, and that lets you buy potion cost cards. So these are important because potion cost cards are very difficult to gain through any way other than buying them. Like stuff like Workshop does not work. Now you might still be able to use something like Lurker. It's not impossible to gain them, but generally people are forced to buy them, and that's really good for Embargo. Secondly, in order to buy them, you actually have to gain the potion first, and then you have to actually draw and play the potion. So this sort of undoes the slowness of Embargo because you're also waiting for them to play something rather than just buying it immediately. It also makes everyone aware of what it is that you're intending to buy. Like as soon as you get that potion, it's obvious to everyone that you're probably buying some of the potion cards in the kingdom. Maybe there's only one potion card. For that reason, it makes it easier for someone to try and counterplay you with Embargo because, you wouldn't buy the potion for any reason other than buying the potion card because it's completely useless otherwise. And of course, potion makes it easier for you to take an alternative strategy because you can buy something else other than the potion. So you see them get a potion, you just be like, all right, I'm going to buy other things, maybe even like an Embargo, and I'm not going to bother going for potion cards. And then you are stuck as the potion player with this potion, and you've got to start taking curses. And if you decide, actually I don't want the potion cards anymore because they've been embargoed, well, you bought this potion that's completely useless. Like, you sort of junked yourself, like particularly if you bought potion as like your opening 4-cost buy. So Embargo can hurt potion cards quite a bit sometimes, especially when there's only one. The other way that you tend to get forewarning a lot of what is happening is with alternative victory cards. So usually we talk about, like, just assumption in these videos that everyone's going for like provinces. But this isn't always the case. You do have cards like Gardens, Duke, and so on and so forth that are just another way to score points. And with a lot of those, these sorts of alternate scoring cards, you have to try and build your deck in a certain way. Like, you certainly build your deck very differently if you are going for a Duchy Duke slog than if you're going for like a province engine. And this can make your opponent like give off huge signs that that's what you're trying to do. In addition to that, it is very unlikely that they will start buying these cards very early, right? You're not buying Dukes anytime in the early game, that's for sure. This gives your opponent plenty of time to try and get their deck under control first and then go for Embargo. It's a lot easier to play Embargo and to justify buying it once you've already got your deck under control, as you can also get the chance to play it a lot faster. You might even be able to gain and play it in the same turn. Now, when we talk about alternate VP, remember that Duchy is also technically an alternative to provinces that is always available. So if you are ahead on provinces and you like have Embargo for some reason, or like it's easy to get, it might be a good idea to try and embargo the duchies. So the reason for this is because this disincentivizes your opponent to buy duchies, which is sort of their only way out of coming back from behind on provinces. And this will encourage them to instead try and gun for provinces too. Well, that's good for you if you're ahead on provinces, because that's the way you want the game to end, right? When you're ahead on provinces, you just want to end the game quickly on provinces. So forcing them to join you is really good. In addition to that, if they want to try and catch up via duchies, then usually they have to try and buy multiple duchies in a single turn. And that means that if you embargo them, they start to gain multiple curses per turn, which is a lot harder to manage. Right? You can sometimes deal with like getting one curse into your deck every turn, but getting 2 or 3 curses all at once can be very difficult to deal with, and you are way more likely to dud. So, so embargo, sometimes when you're ahead, you can try and enforce that lead by embargoing duchies. Now, I am, of course, assuming here, like I say, that provinces are always the way to go. In reality, if you are going for some alternate VP method, then for you, the alternate VP is the provinces, right? So if you are going for the Duchy Duke strategy and your opponent doesn't look like they are, it might be a good idea if you get a 2-turn to buy and embargo it and maybe think about embargoing the provinces instead, right? You might actually get some use out of that. It might not matter, but it might do. It is worth noting, I guess, just quickly, that some alternate VP strategies like workshop gardens might involve a lot of gains rather than buying, so you can't necessarily shut down workshop gardens via embargo just because they're not actually buying cards a lot of the time. Now, we've talked a lot about the embargo token because obviously this is the most interesting part of the card, but it's worth not forgetting that embargo is also a cheap one-shot terminal silver, and sometimes you actually do care just for that. So it might be that you had a spare 2 on your turn, you had nothing else better to spend it on, and you can easily deal with the fact that this is a stop card and it's a terminal, right? You could next turn draw it and play it for its action, like no problem. Maybe you have, for example, the only way to remove coppers is by remodeling them into embargoes and then playing embargoes. That's not very good, but it will actually get you thin, albeit very, very slowly over time, right? It will actually thin your deck. Generally, this is fairly weak use of the card, just as a cheap one-shot terminal silver. This is not very good. The fact that it's a terminal stop card is really bad because you got to spend the action on it and you got to draw it. It's a stop card. So you can sometimes actually hurt yourself doing this, even if you're only planning to have that be a problem one time because you're going to play it and it's going to disappear from your deck. This can get in the way. You'd normally only really consider buying embargo as a cheap one-shot terminal silver if you were otherwise going to buy nothing at all. Because most other alternatives that add a permanent bonus to your deck are going to be better. Like, I would usually buy Vagrant over Embargo just because at some point it might actually do something more useful for me, and I get to play it multiple times. Sometimes I really will consider just buying nothing at all instead of Embargo because I can't really manage the fact that it's a terminal stop card. Like, that's just going to cause me problems. I might have to be forced to draw it and not actually be able to play it. So Embargo has this other use, but it is fairly weak as another alternate use. Sometimes you have an embargo in your deck and you don't really know what you want to embargo, right? You've got to play it, but you're a bit worried that embargoing anything is going to hurt you, especially if you are behind. Most things that you embargo are probably going to be worse for you because your opponent's probably more likely to be able to deal with the curses. They might find it easier to stop buying that card because they already have more copies of it. Even if you embargo provinces, like they're ahead on provinces, at some point you might have to buy provinces and that's going to hurt you more. So you might think, oh man, do I even want to embargo anything? But I would like the money and to get this card out of my deck. Usually the curse pile is chosen in that case as a way to throw away the embargo token because how often do you actually buy curses? And the answer is not very often. There are reasons to do it, including stuff like certain landmarks, but generally no one's buying them. But do watch out because this can sneakily add in a way to purchase the curse pile a lot easier. You can 3-pile by buying all the curses. You see it very, very rarely because it costs you 10 points to do it and usually a lot of buys. But if you are just embargoing the curse pile, then it doesn't cost as many buys anymore. It's very hard to actually plan to do this. It's more likely that this will just present itself as an opportunity because someone just happened to be getting embargoes and throwing them on the curse pile. But it is something to watch out for. Have actually seen someone use it to win before, so it can happen, although it's not something that you set out to do, basically. There are 2 reaction cards out there that can be considered effective counters to embargo. So in Prosperity, we have Watchtower. As long as this is in your hand, whenever you gain a card, you may reveal it to send it straight to the trash. So Watchtower is a good counter against curses. And because with Embargo, you don't have to worry about Watchtower only being in your starting hand, which you would have to worry about if you had like a junking attack. What you do is you get the chance to basically draw your whole deck first, and then still have a Watchtower in hand when it comes to your buy phase. And that means that Watchtower can just completely shut down Embargo as being any sort of threat at all, because they get to just draw their deck, have the Watchtower in hand, and just trash any of the curses without them ever actually entering their deck. So if Watchtower is around, Embargo's probably going to be pretty bad. Another one that's not quite as good is Trader. So Trader allows them in a similar way to draw their deck, and then they can turn the curses into silvers. Now they are still adding stop cards into their deck when they do that, but I would much rather have a silver than I would have an Embargo. Theoretically, with Trader, you can actually intentionally embargo piles so that you can have a Trader in hand and gain free silvers every time you buy a card from that pile. I have never seen anyone actually do this in practice, because silver is also not really a great card, but it is possible, and it is something that is still worth considering whenever Trader is available, right? That you do get to use it to just gain a lot of silvers, which can be relevant sometimes, like maybe there's Feardom on the board or something. So keep it in mind, but yeah, these two cards are things that basically generally just shut down Embargo completely when they're around, as any sort of offensive maneuver, at least. So just a quick summary on Embargo. This card is very, very weak. This is in the bottom 10% of all Kingdom cards. It's rated about the same as Merchant Ship currently, and that puts it as third or fourth worst card in Seaside. They're right next to each other in the rank when I did this video. They're about the same, so it's a toss-up which way they are. It doesn't really matter that much. This card is very slow. There's a lot of ways in which that slowness can cause it to fail to do what you want it to do, and there's lots of ways to get around it and to ignore it with various gainers and so on, or just the curses don't matter by the time it's relevant. Sometimes you can backfire with this on yourself because the embargoing applies to you. You think to yourself, I'm going to try and block this card that my opponent wants, but then it turns out later on that actually you could really use buying that card, and you've embargoed it, and now you're going to hurt yourself. So, oops. You can really screw yourself over with embargo very easily. But it can work, and it's usually best when there are very clear divergent strategies between the two players. So that's it for Embargo. What we are going to do now is we're going to head over to the online client, and we are going to generate some random kingdoms that have Embargo in it, and we are going to see what use it has in these kingdoms. So here I see straight away that we have Chapel to get thin very quickly. We also have a junking attack with Sea Hag, which could potentially lower the curses, but there is Lighthouse as well. I can see me opening... hold on, what do we do? So we want Chapel to get thin. We're too much at risk of being Sea Hagged if we don't, so we're going to get thin. There is a village, but the only draw is Caravan and otherwise cantrips like Merchant. I do like the sound of going heavy on Merchants, I guess, like going thin with a sort of a cantrip kingdom. There is no plus buy. The only other way to gain more than one card per turn is Smugglers, which I think is actually going to be decent here. Because me and my opponent are probably using similar strategies, and honestly I'll be fine with whatever they gain, I think. So I am going to open Chapel, and I don't think I care about Lighthouse. I don't think anyone's going to bother with Sea Hag. I think it's actually going to be fairly easy to deal with the curses as they come along. So Sea Hag's a bit of a waste, so Lighthouse is also a bit of a waste. I'm going to open Chapel and Silver, and... is that what I'm going to do? And I guess I'm going to start picking up a load of Merchants, and eventually I might get some Caravans, but I will get Smugglers. But I'm not going to open Smugglers. I think I'd rather play the Chapel sooner, so I'm going to open with Silver, and then I'll pick up a Smugglers at my next opportunity, perhaps. Maybe I do just open Chapel Smugglers, I'm not so sure. But I don't want to run out of money completely, so it would be nice to at least get one silver in my deck first. Mining Village, I guess you only really need one because there's only 2 terminals that you're going to play, but I might get some more. You might be able to vassal as well, but we only want to build so high anyway because we're going to gun for 1 province per turn. In fact, yeah, how good is Smugglers if we're going to go for 1 province turn? Eventually, Smugglers is going to stop being used. Having said that, it might be useful because we might have to start like Duchy dancing, and Smugglers is going to be really important. So I guess we're going to do that. Embargo is no good here. Like, what are we going to embargo? I don't really want to open it. And if they do embargo something like Merchant or Vassal, you just buy the other, really, right? You just start buying caravans, or you just buy it anyway, and you just draw, and you just play the chapel and you smash the curses. Like, it doesn't feel very good here. Being a terminal's really bad. I don't actually want to spend my time on villages because I don't have very good ways to gain lots of extra cards. So Embargo, I think I just ignore it here, honestly. Like, there's just too much else going on and it's too fast. And I don't really care for Embargo, quite frankly. Is there a way to make it work? We'd have to get like an extra mining village and play it later, but we're sort of doing the same strategy and I don't really care. Yeah, because there's no gainer, which I guess is good, but on the other hand, it means that it's hard to actually buy the embargo in the first place. Like, the opportunity cost on embargo is too high on this board. It is really the main problem. So I think I skip embargo here. I expect I'm not going to see much use out of embargo, honestly. So on this next kingdom, we have trashing is salvager, and that's it. That's fine. Looks like our only draw is library, so we've got fishing village, warehouse, and library, which is also okay as a draw. Smugglers, is it useful here? I think so. I think we're going to make use of smugglers because we're going to want to be gaining lots of engine components, and I don't really see any alternative to the engine, quite frankly. Having said that, because salvager is our only trasher, I think we're probably going to get more than 1 salvager, but curses are actually quite nasty here. Does that mean embargo might be useful? I'm too busy trying to buy fishing villages. I don't think I'm going to make use of lurker that much here. Like, smugglers is way better. Do I open... I open like what? Do I open with the smugglers and like salvager and hope they don't collide? Probably. I think that's what I do. I definitely want to like gain as many fishing villages and get the libraries, and even poacher is fine in library. It depends on how much the pile's empty, but there's probably only the fishing village pile going to empty, so I think poacher is okay here as well. We should be able to make a decent engine, but I don't know if we're ever going to get all the way up to double province. But yeah, like, embargo doesn't feel that good. There are ways to get around it. If someone does get an embargo and start like trying to embargo fishing village or whatever, then I just don't buy as many as I normally would. Like, how many like terminals are you actually playing? Not that many. You don't even need that many libraries, really, and you can like pick up your salvages and stuff. And then there's like smugglers. You might find a way that you can actually keep just playing smuggler and smuggling the embargoed card. I don't know. Someone has to actually jump in and buy it, though, in the first place. Embargo doesn't feel very good here to me. Again, it's a problem with, like, when are we actually going to get it and buy it? We might get one later, but what are we going to do? I think if we ever use embargo, we had like a spare 2 money to spend. Like, we were already drawing our deck pretty well, and we would probably like deny duchies or something, and we're in the lead. I just don't see embargo doing very well. Now, you can theoretically buy an embargo and keep yanking it out of the trash with lurker, but that doesn't feel very good, right? Like, that's not a great use of like a lurker, to be quite honest. I would much rather, if I'm going to use lurker, I would smash some important engine component that's more expensive, and then with salvager, and then fish it back out. Which I could end up doing towards the end of the game. Like, maybe lurker's fine here, but lurker also as a gainer, like, if worse comes to the worst, you can sort of work around embargo a bit by doing that. It's going to take a while to get thin, and the curses feel bad, but again, I just don't like buying the embargo early on, so I think I ignore it on this kingdom. But I can see ways that, in theory, Embargo can screw stuff up, but it's too easy to work around it, I think. So I think Embargo's no good on that kingdom. So here we have, it looks like we've got a whole bunch of stuff that we need. So we've got a village with bazaar, we've got trashing with moneylender and trading post and lookout. So there's lots of ways. We can draw with library, but also there is a double tactician engine theoretically. So we can use bazaar and cut purse and or navigator to make a double tactician deck here, and we can thin reasonably well. It can be a little bit difficult to get rid of the estates, I suppose. There is always trading post for that. You can eventually smash them all down into just a silver and a trading post. That's not great. Is there any way to discard that we can make use of lookout? Not really. So we can't get super thin, but we can do not library. Double tactician is what we want. In fact, it's okay to have a little bit of junk left over because you need something to discard with tactician anyway. So I think we're going to do a double tactician board here. We are going to open probably lookout and moneylender. I think I'm not actually too worried about getting cut pursed, even though I want 5 costs if I'm opening with lookout, but I do just want to get thin. Is that really the case? Is smugglers good? Probably to get bazaars, actually. I think smugglers is okay for a while, and then we just look to trash it. So maybe instead, I don't want the smugglers right away. I don't want any more of these cards. It's bazaars I want, so I want to wait on smugglers until bazaars are in force, I guess. I really want to open lookout moneylender and try and get rid of the estates when there's a good chance to do it. So I think I do that, and I do just wait a little bit on getting the 5s. Embargo, is it good? Well, what's the alternate strategy? Everybody wants bazaars, everybody wants tacticians. Is there any other strategy that can defeat this? Not really, right? Like, what are you doing other than the double tactician like engine here? Library, big money? You wouldn't really want get embargo with that. Like, what would you embargo anyway? And is it doable? So the curses actually are a problem. So the big problem is the only way to trash curses out of your hand is to use trading post, and that's going to give you a lot of silvers, which is actually bad with tactician. But you can't really use lookout if you're doing double tactician because the curses are coming in on your buy phase. Maybe you end up being able to buy embargo opportunistically. If your opponent is not doing the double tactician thing, that's fine. I'm just thinking, what would you do that is not the double tactician deck that you could screw up with an embargo, like if you went for an alternate strategy? But the only thing that I can really see you doing is like library, big money, and that just doesn't feel like it's going to win, right? Because the tactician's giving you that extra buy, which is actually going to be important for the engine as well. I guess if you're doing library big money, you'd embargo the duchies, wouldn't you, I suppose? Because it's just going to take a while for your opponent to be gaining, but you're going to get cut purse to death because the double tactician player wants to play cut purses. So I don't think there's an alternate strategy, and in that case, like, embargo's pretty bad. So I think embargo's not used here. It's just hard to find good use of embargo. When I suppose on all of these kingdoms there could be a situation where you get it really late in the game and try and like embargo duchies or something, but otherwise it's hard to justify, I think. So we have trashing with masquerade and trading post. There is no village. There is another junker with sea hag. There is market. Masquerade, big money is probably the thing that we're doing here. Maybe we go into masquerade with Duchy Duke strategy. Like, maybe that works and we don't actually trash that many. And if our opponent wants to sea hag us, we've got masquerade to deal with that. So I think we don't even bother to sea hag our opponent. We just masquerade into Duchy Duke. Now, the problem is that is actually a little bit at risk of embargo, But if we're doing like Masquerade with Duchy Duke, we can just send the curses off to our opponent and like start trashing them. So I don't think it's that big a worry. Like, what do you do outside of Duchy Duke? How does a province player win? And the problem is that so they can get thin with Masquerade, but then what are they doing? Right, they can't really do very well out of playing a load of markets. There just doesn't feel like anything good. Like, I would like to think that Cut Purse and Sea Hag would hurt the Duchy Duke player, but the province player wants to play Masquerade instead and doesn't really have the terminal space to do that very much. So, like, the lack of the village, I think it has to be Duchy Duke, and like, it's very clearly the winner here. There's nothing better to do, and as a result, like, trying to embargo it isn't even that useful because they've got like Masquerade to like counter it a bit. Well, yeah, and the province player doesn't really want to be buying Embargo, so again, I think Embargo's just no use here. It's just everyone just wants to be playing a Masquerade every turn. So, yeah, what do you do? You're not even trashing that much with Masquerade. You want to keep some coppers around to keep you safer from other Masquerades. Yeah, so I think Embargo's no good here as well. I don't understand what I do with it on this board, so therefore it seems pretty bad. And the fact that it's terminal actually really hurts there. Alright, here comes the final kingdom. So we have trashing Lookout and Salvager. The only village is Nobles, which kind of stinks, and there are 3 really powerful attack draw cards that are like junkers as well. I think Witch is going to be the strongest one out of this, but you can Witch and Ghost Ship. In that case, you don't really need Torturer, to be honest, because Witch is, giving out the curses better. So I really want to get thin, so I'm actually going to open Lookout and also Salvager just to get thin as quickly as possible. I'm then going to try to build a Nobles draw engine, and I might need like laboratories to do that, but I will need some money. I think it's okay. Like, I want to focus on thinning so much. That means I'm not going to pick up a Witch or even a Nobles for a while early on. But I think it's just too important to try and get all that thinning in. So I'm going to buy Lookout Salvager, and then I'm going to be going for silvers. If I get a 5-2 split, I'm probably going Witch and then Haven. Like, I don't really care for Embargo. I would rather have a Haven in this deck, I think. It's just going to be more useful. Prevents collision early on. So that's what I do on a 5-2. Maybe Ghost Ship is better than Witch, thinking about it. Like, maybe Ghost Ship really, really destroys my opponent's chance of ever hitting 5. And Ghost Ship is the better opener. That's interesting. Maybe, yeah. Anyway, Embargo's no use here, I think. There's another Junker and the curses are going to run out. And, yeah, you don't really need an Embargo early on, quite frankly. The curse is just going to empty because this is playing Witch as much as you can is basically the main thing to do here, and get that draw engine. Maybe eventually, after you have some Witches, like, you try and get labs and you can swap to buying some bridges, but I think we're just going to be going like gold and buying 1 province per turn or something eventually. Man, I don't know though, like Nobles, like you get the Nobles to play more bridges or Witches, but it's really lab that you're kind of drawing with and you want to get thin. I think I prefer the 4-3 opener here just to get thin quickly. Anyway, Embargo's no use, I think. So there was 5 kingdoms, and I don't think I used Embargo on any single one, and that was really expected before I did this. Like, it's just not very good card. It's just very hard to use. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope this was useful for you, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.